pandemic recovery is gaining pace, and among the many lessons learned during the periods of restriction was that businesses needed to increase adaptability and resilience through digital technologies. Remote and hybrid working, as well as data and application availability, came into sharp focus as businesses everywhere adapted first to restrictions, but also to new opportunities and ways of working. Those that had strong digital foundations adapted quickest. But those businesses that do not have a sound digital base for operations will not be able to weather, let alone take advantage of this demand pattern that is likely to continue in the current climate of disruption and uncertainty. As sustainability efforts for large organizations intensify, many are seeing the benefits of circular economies as the new operating model for the future to enable them to meet sustainability goals while remaining responsibly profitable. All this is driving demand for data center services up. Across the globe, but especially in developing nations and growing economies, everything from social media to government services are looking to digital infrastructure as a basis on which to develop and service the growing user base. However, the energy crisis, complex geopolitical situations, and the climate imperative are conspiring to make progress challenging. Sheer scale is not enough to meet those demands, nor even the relentless drive for efficiency. A new, fully integrated approach with consideration for the full life cycle of operation and disposal is needed, along with new thinking in deployment, operations, and management to ensure fast implementation without compromising reliability and performance whilst meeting sustainability goals. Joining me today for this very special interview and to talk about all this and more is Schneider Electric's Natalya Makarochkina, Senior Vice President for the Secure Power Division's International Operations. And Natalie, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. This is a super interesting topic, but also extremely timely and again, challenging with everything that's going on. My first question to you is to kind of paint a picture before we jump into the niche discussion around this. So it really is, as Senior Vice President for Schneider Electric Secure Power International and leading the business across multiple geographies, it's a vast landmass that you cover. What kinds of influences are driving the demand for capacity from businesses today?
Let's talk a little bit about the zone, because, you know, the international zone is usually East Asia, Pacific, Japan, Middle East and Africa, India and South America. And what unites these different zones is actually the lessons learned from pandemic, and I guess they are unique for the whole world. And what we see that the businesses have really understood and realized that what is necessary now is resilience and adaptability, which can be provided only through digital technology. So what we see is very obvious from COVID, when it started with the communication, when physical communication was no longer possible, we really came to a digital communication. Good example is taking Zoom, which we are using now for our discussion. Zoom in 2018, end of 2019, they only had about 10 million of, let's say, 10 million participants per month. If you compare to May, for example, 2020, so right after pandemic started, it grew by 20%, by 200%. It grew to 200. Okay, it grew 20 times. Yeah, it grew 20 times to 200 million, and continued to grow further on. Teams grew even further. So we really started using the digital technology to communicate. Working from home also created lots of data. So we started thinking about how to have the call center from home, how to move the accountant teams to home. Even there were new terminology appeared, like working from home. And it continues after pandemic is over. It's interesting that the people realize lots of value in working from home. More than 75% would like to continue working from home. Even a risky thing is that the people looking for hybrid environment, and if you look, about 40% would say we're ready to change a job if hybrid environment, so working from home and working from office, is not available anymore. So it's interesting data, and it's interesting change in the lifestyle of the people. But it does not only affect the communication area and the meetings through Zoom, interview which we are having through Zoom. It's interesting to say that it also reorganized the complete things we received through internet, which were less popular. Like e-commerce grew by more than 10 times, and it continues to grow. And not only e-commerce, other financial services through internet became extremely popular. What also happened, if you remember, that the automation became very strong. The processes, the number of the people who were allowed in the factories have reduced during the COVID. So to be successful, to be able to produce in the same amount, the company had to look for different ways of automation. And this really resulted in growing of what we called Internet of Things. And all these really considerably generated lots of data. Absolutely. So we really see more online deliveries. We see more automation in the factories. We see more people working on hybrid. And of course, lots of things which changed and stayed in our lives. So it was like COVID, it came, it moved. Fortunately for all of us, the impact is much less in terms of the healthcare. But what changed was a complete attitude of the population to digitization. And we see here robo-advisors, we see here many other things happening in our life, which came during the COVID and they stayed there. All these generates lots of data, which are required by businesses to do operations, which are required by people to do their normal financial services, which is required by video. So lots of new data appears, and it was a really multiplication of the data which we saw.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a tremendous transformation in our daily lives, because all this was sort of starting to happen, or we were at least talking a lot about automation and adoption of digital across all layers of society. But then COVID came, and within 2 years, we moved 10 years. And I think there was I can't remember who did the study, but it was one of those big houses that did a big study around, and digital adoption was about 7.5 to 8 years ahead of what it was meant to be last year. So it's quite a lot of pressure. And I like the Zoom example because it really exemplifies how things change. And Microsoft did the same thing. Within the first 2 weeks of COVID in March 2020, they brought online 100 megawatts of power just to keep up with their services, with Teams and all the Microsoft services. So it's been an amazing, not amazing, it's been a transformational digital transformation, which in itself is amazing. The reason why it happened is probably not so amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
But Natalya, so picking up also on the regions that you cover, because you do cover a lot of regions, including Asia, a bit of Africa, Middle East, and Europe, and all that. What are you seeing in terms of demands from the high growth regions?
I would say all my regions, and it might sound surprisingly, but if you look into the cloud data or overall data centers, they grow double-digit year on year. So we're talking about above 10% year-on-year growth, be it in Middle East Africa or in Pacific regions. And it's not only for Schneider Electric, we see this trend. Data center market was very strong in East Asia and Pacific initially, and it accounted maybe for 40% of the business and of the total data center business in the area which I manage. We did not expect that even with this amount of new data centers, the area will continue to grow more than 10%. Well, what we see is coming into the play. We saw it before, but now it comes very rapidly, is Middle East. Middle East and Africa is really growing above 10% and up to 15 to 20% year on year. And that's the demand of the market caused by the huge amount of data generated. It's interesting to note that we used to have Microsoft, we used to have Facebook, and it would not be surprising to say that definitely you gave an example of Teams, right, of Microsoft. Now they have hyperscale plans in Hyderabad. But Facebook having a multi-story plan in Singapore. But what is interesting is to see that more than 40% of the business, in fact, is coming now from the local players. And we really have quite a lot of local players in the market, which are now showing not only their big interest in the market development, but also the huge growth. And we see lots of large data centers appearing on the market.
No, that's incredible figures as well, because 15-20% year-on-year growth. They are big figures, and Africa has been transforming over the last 5 years, but especially the last 12 months have been tremendous especially with all the American operators coming in. And of course, the Middle East. I mean, the Middle East, you look at Saudi Arabia, the projects coming up are just, it's not even 100 million or 200 million, it's the billions.
Oh, I'm talking about billions of dollars,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's crazy. I think the government has a $14.6 or $15 billion project just on the government front to build data centers across Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, that country is going to explode with data center construction, which I'm sure Schneider will be behind a lot of it.
Yeah, it's true. Saudi Arabia is interesting because simultaneously with the data being generated and also following the trend on the market, Saudi Arabia is also opening up to the world. They're building the resort area along the Red Sea. They are opening up to the world and building new hotels, also developing lots of things. Interesting, for example, in Dubai, a project on agriculture, which is absolutely digital project on agriculture, but it was also in a way stimulated by COVID because the country realized they want to have enough food to sufficient for their own population. And it is also much digital that it generates a lot of data.
Yeah.
And yeah, and definitely to keep this data, you need to have cloud services, right? But we have expectations, and expectations of the world cloud infrastructure services spend in Q1 2022 is expected to be about $56 billion only in one quarter, which is more than 34% in comparison to Q1 2021. So that's interesting to see. And if you look into the reports from Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud, their combined growth is more than 42% within this period. Imagine the growth of the cloud, right? So we actually can expect that the cloud will continue to grow, at least in my zones, of about 15% year on year, which is definitely will reach a co-location market to a huge figure, right? So it will be something unbelievably big, right? So interesting, as I said, lots of things are happening in the regions. And a good trend, we definitely have large providers like AirTrunk, Etisalat, Kidi, Odata, PureDC. These are all regional players coming into this game. Interesting example I can give is about Australian data center because it's on the way cloud, but at the same time, it's what we call is cloud at the edge. There's a company, maybe you have heard, is Leading Edge Data Center company. It's called Leading Edge Data Centers. Yep. Okay, that's the name of the company. And it emerged in Australia. And the idea of this company was to provide stable, reliable, cost-effective connectivity to regional Australia. So they built around 25 data centers, mid-size, I would say. And we as Schneider were really proud to partner with the Leading Edge to design, build, and commission these data centers. And it's interesting that by providing these colo services at the edge, this company allowed the local consumers to save up to 80% of the cost. Imagine this, just providing these edge data centers, the local companies were able to save lots of money, okay? And this is companies which are dealing very often, governmental companies dealing with education or emergency services or healthcare, etc. So that's interesting. Another trend is a very interesting trend that's happening with telco. And if you look into telco, there are actually two trends happening with telco companies. Everyone is saying, is the telco is consuming more than colo? I would say depends, because some telco companies are selling off their data centers and they become just service providers, so they usually use other colo centers. And some are doing totally the opposite trend. They start to expand their facilities, not only to meet their own needs, but also to provide the colo services to the customers in the region. I think it mainly depends on the availability of the colo services in the region and the future business, what they see there. But it's interesting because they're two different, contradictory even trends in telco markets.
I like the fact that you brought the telco conversation because it's often one that gets forgotten. when we talk about colocation and data centers. Even the edge, I mean, picking up on your first words around IoT and the amount of devices coming online, and the fact that there's millions and millions and millions of people connected to the internet in a much more widespread geographical area than there used to be before COVID. No worries. Even the edge, I feel over the last maybe 2 years, you got a bit of a backstage in the discussions, because we're all very focused on the bigger builds to really power Zoom and Teams and governments and everything that we need to power. So you've kind of mentioned already quite a lot of different types of infrastructure for data centers and how they work and everything. But how would you kind of describe, give us a breakdown of how you see the data center infrastructure in the market today within the regions that you cover?
Okay, definitely there are, as I said, hyperscalers, right? Like Microsoft, Google coming into the zone and providing lots of cloud resources for colocation and for other providers. At the same time, we see regional players, some providing similar on-premise infrastructure, also providing the cloud services, but some also provide what we call is also on premise, but close to the customer, what we call is edge. And in fact, if you look into the business, most of the businesses are now using both. Okay, they really look into hybrid architecture approach because it provides them with lots of flexibility. Okay, they can keep the essential data they use every day on premise, which is close and secure. Some data, personal data in some countries, as you know, is not allowed to be kept in cloud, especially if the cloud is not in the same country, right? So this data has to be kept on premises. At the same time, there's a lot of data which is not on a daily basis used, but still is important for the company, be it for the reporting or be it for their further work. And they really benefit from using the colo services on cloud deployment. And this gives the companies really lots of resilience at the same time as flexibility to decide to what level we will use it. And it's interesting to see, I would not say that maybe at a certain point of time in terms of the number, edge seems bigger in terms of the number of the data centers. In terms of the volume or the size, definitely cloud will still lead, but I would say both are growing at a very high speed. In some zones, we will see more edge data centers appearing because it was not so common before. And there was a couple of years ago, a big trend of people going to cloud, only cloud, only cloud. And then it changed considerably when people realized the hybrid mode is the most effective one. What is also helping the people to operate and use both cloud and on-premise data center is definitely the development of a software solution. And there we really see a huge increase in Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things, right? Because without it, it would be very difficult to manage many things, both remotely and on-premise. As to Schneider, we definitely see lots of opportunities where we can provide sustainable and security services, providing through the CIM 3.0, which is definitely one of the key areas which will allow the customers to orchestrate and control their homogeneous environment.
And that's an interesting part of Schneider's portfolio, because you kind of took that on board quite early in the journey of the data center, especially the software side of things. It's always something that's been quite fascinating to watch. I believe it's called EcoStructure.
Absolutely, EcoStructure IT, right?
Yeah, I remember when you got launched and the app and everything, and seeing it in St. Louis, and I was like, all right, this is the beginning of a different service provisioning for the market. But and then Natalya, so of course we talked about all the capacity that came up during the last 2 years. A lot of it came up. It drove a lot of innovation into the data center on infrastructure side, on the software side. But how can businesses utilize all this new level of capacity and also all these new applications? Because there's so much stuff now. And as the world starts going back to a new normal, it's not going to be normal as it was before, but into a new normal, the utilization levels will kind of vary a little bit until things get get to a normal level, I guess, to a new normal level, if that makes sense. How do you say business can utilize this new level of capacity and applications?
Okay, so it was a long question. Let me first comment on EcoStruxure IT, because when we talk about colo centers or colo providers or telco, we should not forget who is their end customers, right? So it's actually the end customer which creates the demand. And it's very often has nothing to do with telco. When we talk about EcoStruxure IT portfolio, was a good example for retail chain, jewelry retail chain, Tanish, in India, which used our solution to manage their own data centers. And they used it actually to manage their infrastructure to ensure that they have remote monitoring and management across the entire chain of all the shops across the state. So it's an interesting solution, which of course created data for cloud and service providers. And now looking into the growth, if you say that really what is happening, the demand is very high. How to satisfy the demand, which is much higher than what is available now, to make it to a better way for usage for the customers, we can talk about standardized design. And if you talk about standardized design, we talk about modular to a large case. For example, you know that Schneider has been very long already in the business of modular data centers, or what we call is a prefabricated data center options. And what is good about this option, first of all, that it is Schneider which takes care of the design, right, as well as all the pre-certified designs, pre-configured stacks, everything ready. So the customer, what we call is just plug and play. And as a positive thing that what we design is usually also open to scalability. So you can really expand as your business grows, and you can expand it considerably, either also using by modular designs or within the same modular if you did not fill it into the 100%. I guess this new thing, I would not call it new because we used it before pandemic. We started creating this modular design for some demands in far areas where it was not easy to build the capital construction, the physical building. It was designed for mining and for many other companies. But it's interesting to notice that now it becomes very popular, and the modular prefabricated data center becomes so popular that it starts replacing the traditional built data centers. Traditional built in data centers does not provide you the same scalability. It is very often less efficient. And of course, the capacity to build it quickly is less than if you use really the modular design, okay? And it's interesting that Schneider not only doing it themselves, but we also provide different design tools and calculators, which can speed up the process. And again, we were talking about EcoStruxure IT. With EcoStruxure, we also have Facility Expert, which is our cloud-based software, which is easing the facility operations, maintenance, and also energy management. Okay, so that's maybe one of the interesting things. Now energy becomes extremely important, and you know that Schneider is all in. And for this, we use the company ETAP, which we bought, as well as electrical digital twin. That's a new tool which serves as an active blueprint of the power system. Okay, so that helps data center operators achieve their sustainability goals through really better utilization of the data center and increasing efficiency of it. So that's what we call is built-in and increased automation within the modular data center. It's a new level of modular data center in comparison to what it was before.
Okay, there's a lot to dissect from that answer, because I know it was a long question as well. I do like to talk a bit too much sometimes. But picking up on the modular data center first, would you say that's sort of the holy grail to be able to deploy infrastructure quicker to really answer the demands that we see in the market today, especially these new demands that's an always-on society. Is the modular data center the key, or is there something else that we can do to quickly deploy this infrastructure?
Well, the modular data center is just, let's say, a help to start it very quickly. This does not exclude our traditional data center or optimization of our existing traditional data center, increasing the capacity of the traditional data center by the new technologies which appear now. And again, the software plays an extremely important role in this, that you can increase the efficiency and capacity of the existing data center by introducing a new software technology. I would say there is lots of new opportunities which are appearing now, and they can be used. Also, look into the new equipment which is being developed now. If you look into, for example, lithium-ion batteries, now it is so popular when you talk about UPSs and lithium-ion batteries. And in traditional previous, let's say 5 years ago, every traditional data center would have a battery room, which took lots of space. Now, if you replace UPSs with lithium-ion batteries, you don't need a battery room. So it's lots of things, starting from equipment itself, which develops, ending up with software and modular data center, prefabricated data centers. It can be also not as a modular, it can be prefabricated solution, which can be put in existing traditional data center building. So all this is now used on the market to try to satisfy the demand, which is really, as I said, extremely high, more than 10% growth year on year, which is a lot.
It's a healthy growth. It's business as well, and it keeps a lot of things alive. And then on the second part of your answer, you mentioned electricity, power, some of the software that's utilized to help with that as well. I mean, data center operators can be just as much subjected to the pressures that businesses feel, especially with energy issues that we all currently face.
Definitely they are.
The question already, but what can be done to sort of help alleviate that in the days that we live?
Well, I think what we are supporting the data centers, but that's a trend on the market, which I think in a couple of years would become a new normal. And we see an interesting trend where data centers in some areas are used as microgrids. So they really, with more on-site generation, they're using also greener power from a smart grid. And they not only are more resilient and better able to handle all these energy issues or restrictions or outage or failures, but also what they're doing, they actually supplying back, not during the peak of the data center, they supplying back, they conclude the purchase agreements, power purchase agreement with the government, and they can supply back some excess of the energy, of the power, back to the grid. And we see more and more data centers not switching off completely, but using to a large extent what we call as renewable energy sources. And in my zone, it's mainly solar, but in some areas it could be also other renewable, but mainly solar in my zone.
Actually, that segues us into the next question, which is quite timely, around sustainability, because everyone wants to be green, and there's a lot of efforts. And as you mentioned, putting power back in the grid with microgrids and all that, it's an amazing initiative that the industry has taken over the last couple of years. But how do we go about measuring this? Because this is all very nice and dandy to do it all, but then if we don't really have a measuring scale, or if we don't have a rule book, I don't know if we need a rule book. Do we even need a rule book? If we don't have a rule book, if we don't have some sort of standards or measuring systems, how can we be transparent? How can people trust us on what we're doing?
Well, you know, that Schneider and sustainability are coming together from a long, long time. At the time when many people were not talking about sustainability yet, and many people were surprised. And we have invested a lot into really developing standardized metrics for sustainability. And this is extremely important to have the same shared standardized metrics across all geographies and across all companies, I would say, because this is crucial, as you rightly said. Otherwise, how can we adopt, how can you really use the benchmarking, how you can check what it is. So and Schneider Electric issues a white paper. You can really go to our site and look into it, because it's really very long and large. But to sum it up, we proposed 5 categories, which includes 23 key metrics for data center operators. And they differ from the status of where this particular data center is in terms of sustainability. Are you at the beginning? Are you at advanced level? Or are you at a leading stage? So that the companies can really start implementing the sustainability metrics and start measuring, okay? So this really, we identify about 17 most relevant sustainability frameworks and standards, which the data center can check if they're meeting it or not. On top of that, we have launched Green Premium Program. Okay, and we update it regularly. Just recently, it's been updated again. And what it is interesting that it's been upgraded with recognized environmental claims and extended to cover all offers, including products, services, and solutions. So you cannot be sustainable in one area only. It should be a complete portfolio. It should be a complete value proposition, which is really sustainable. Another thing what we really do is we look together to work with our companies, with our clients. As I said, if 5 years ago, maybe 10 years for sure, but 5 years ago, when you talk about sustainability, it was not something people were interested in. They were looking at it as something which will require more investment, if it is really needed. Now, it's not that people become only environmental conscious, more environmental conscious than before, but also the customers, their end customers, they really put as sustainability as one of the key angles in their life. A good example is that we worked with Swedish company Eco Data Center to achieve their ambition, which was put by the CEO, Mr. Svenfeld, who said that the ambition of the company is to be climate positive. And he admitted with the help of Schneider, they have really put this ambition into reality. And we really, it's not only the information we provide, we also provide the services, again, through the software, okay, through digitization and through putting the efficiency on the energy solutions. Okay.
That's interesting. I mean, I read the white paper that Schneider put out with the 5 pillars and the different journeys. And I think beyond the 5 pillars and the 23 points that you guys set out, I think the most interesting part of it was really being split into 3 phases. So for the newbies, for the middle, for the ones in the middle of the journey, and then for the ones more advanced. Because I think that was probably what was missing, because there was always pillars, but there was never that, where am I on this journey? And we do so many businesses coming into this trip now of having to become green and sustainable, and with the whole scope conversation 1, 2, 3. A lot of people still don't even know what 1, 2, 3 mean at this stage, where businesses are embarking on this. So beyond what Schneider is doing, how do you think vendors can also help, and service providers can help businesses further dive into sustainability and really assess what they are doing to help them become green?
Data center, actually, it's interesting, because if you look into maybe the biggest threat to the environment, if you look into it, is really emissions, right? And when we talk about emissions, everyone says, okay, there is different ways of really emission. And that's what we talk about, carbon intensive activities. We talk about 3 scopes: scope 1 emission, scope 2, and scope 3 emission. So everyone knows about scope 1, right? So it's very simple. That's what you in particular produce as a company, right? So if you were driving a car, the car produces gases, okay, then it's very clear. It is scope 1 emissions. And that's what everyone can control very easily, because that's what you as a company produce. The second, what we call is scope 2, is the emission which you consume actually to produce your goods. For example, the scope 2 emission for data center will be really like using the electricity or energy. So we buy it to heat or to cool the buildings, right? So it's produced on our behalf. We are not producing the electricity as a data center, but we are using it because we cannot live without it. So anything used to produce this and connected with the emission is scope 2. What is interesting, lots of people were never thinking about scope 3 in their behalf. And if you look into the scope 3, that's a category for all the emissions associated with the company itself. For example, if you build the UPS, okay, we need to buy spare parts to build the UPS. Then everything produced by our suppliers from the products we buy, that it's what we refer to the scope 3 emission. And if you compare this, that will be the biggest one, in fact. So really, to be sustainable for the data center, it's not sufficient to control scope 1 and scope 2. It's important, and that's what Schneider has always been talking about, is to build the considerable business chain. That's where every producer, every supplier is as focused on the sustainability as Schneider, and we're really focusing on communicating and dealing with the suppliers, taking care of sustainability, looking into standardizing it, really checking on their production areas. So this is extremely important. So if you look into the consideration for the businesses, Schneider has actually developed 5 key considerations for the businesses, right? For the energy sustainability reporting. Okay, if you talk about the 5, the first is determining which topics to address. Because if you are a new business, you cannot address everything. So you select the topic you want to address, okay? This can be from industry, the geography dependent. You choose what is the most essential for you, okay? That's what you start from. The second is you identifying which level of material assessment is required in this case, in terms of how deep you want to go and how inclusive you could go. The third is the frequency of disclosures. Okay, so how much of information you can disclose. It should be appropriate amount of information to be measured, but it should also take into account the sensitivity of the information, because you cannot disclose all the information. Number 4, you have really select the right ranking agency, which will work with you. So there should be a certified agency, which is already knows how to compare with the right benchmarking. Okay, your industry, your company with the same company in the same industry, okay? And the fifth-wise is important to align with the right frameworks and certification. So this really can help the business to go green, to become much greener than before. And we also provide our sustainability impact awards, which we award our partners, which are dealing with Schneider Electric, so to see how they leverage their energy, how they leverage sustainability in their solutions, in the work they do. And maybe you have heard about it. I think there is a very famous magazine, which is called Corporate Knights. And it ranked in 2021 Schneider Electric as the world's most sustainable corporation, because we really put lots of efforts. We have a special division which is focusing on sustainability, both within the company as well as dealing with our partners, suppliers, and customers.
No, absolutely. I mean, your CEO, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, is one of the global voices for sustainability. He's often speaking down at Davos and with prime ministers and presidents across the globe. So Schneider is one of the forefront of the global transition, not just in data centers. It's important to point out as well. Natalya, my last question would be, because we can talk about sustainability as much as we want, but this is not a one-man or one company's job. This is an industry, a global scale task that everyone is getting involved with. What can people do? What can vendors in the data infrastructure space do to bring more conversation forwards and to really connect and talk and actually then get to action on this journey?
Well, first of all, as you rightly said, our CEO Jean-Pascal Trucard is a big speaker about sustainability. So we have to promote, we have to talk, we have to share. We have to share our knowledge and what we have learned, as well as assist our customers with the real solution. So we need to engage on this journey altogether. We see the demand from many companies now being ranked according to their sustainability efforts. The more we can really help the companies to understand the solutions which we develop with the designs we build, because every new product we develop, it's first of all focused on how sustainable the product is. And we really look into the highest standards of availability, resilience, adaptability, scalability, and performance. And this is really taking into account everything I have mentioned before, right? So we look into the sustainability metrics when developing any new product as a company. So by providing our solution, a complete data center solution, we can be sure and we can ensure our customers the solution we really provide is 100% sustainable to the best of existing now on the market. And we are ready to share with our customers as well how for them to implement our solutions to achieve their better goals on sustainability. And as I already said, we have established our Sustainability Impact Awards. So it's one of the attempts to attract attention and to motivate the people to get on this journey, to motivate the partners to get on this journey. By the way we talk, and we now know how to manage it. So it turned from just many people saying, okay, nice word, as you said, we can talk about sustainability, but now we know how to manage it. If you look into the data centers, we know how to manage it. So if you're a customer and you want to use a colo data center, you can come and say, I want to know how sustainable you are. Please show me if you're a sustainable data center. What are you doing? This is the key pillars I want to look at. Okay, so that's a competitive advantage. I was really talking to the customers, and I like 5 years in this role, right? 5 years ago, I would not have the customers asking me, can we ensure that we can build a sustainable data center and prove it to our end customers? Now, every second customer I'm talking to, they ask us, what in particular you are doing in sustainability? How you can help us to build a more robust, resilient, and really sustainable data center, sustainable in a way that it is very good for the environment, right? And also, you know that Forbes get engaged into this. They are listing a range of companies which are really have progressed a lot for the last 3 to 5 years, who are really leading with sustainability, right? Who can be a market differentiator. And I can say like Apple, right? Or Target company or Patagonia. These are the companies which are in Forbes really called a sustainable company. So this is a competitive advantage. Now, sustainability is not only an essential need of the people, of the companies. It's not only understanding and goodwill, it also becomes an extremely competitive advantage for the many customers to be it.
Absolutely. We do see the transition from just talk to actually getting the boots on the ground and doing things. And investors have noticed that, because it has become a little bit harder to get investments to get data centers off the ground if there isn't a good sustainable strategy behind it. Natalya Makarochkina, Senior Vice President for the Secure Power Division for International Operations at Schneider Electric, thank you so much for talking to me. As to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to share these episodes and also follow and subscribe to the Tech Capital, where you can find the latest news and views from the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.